Last week, we talked about Gideon and how the Lord used him to rescue the Israelites from the hand of Midian. There's a cycle in the Judges where the Israelites are doing good, they forget the Lord, they are captured by a foreign nation, they cry out, the Lord sends them a judge, and then they are freed. The cycle continues. Gideon freed them in our story last week. They continue the cycle several times, and now we are going to be talking about Samson. And if you think about physically strong people in the Bible, he would make your top 5, definitely. If you think about spiritually strong people in the Bible, I don't know that we would consider him. And for that reason, this is kind of a challenging story for me. It's a challenging passage in the Bible that Samson doesn't seem to do anything right. Like, he is driven by lust and anger and vengeance, and you don't see him cry out to the Lord except for once in the story. And so it's sometimes hard for me to think about, like, what was God doing? Why was he using Samson? The encouraging part about it is that Samson is so flawed, and God uses him anyway. That means that when we feel so flawed, God can use us anyway. So that's an encouraging thing. So we're going to talk about Samson for just a little bit. An angel comes to Samson's father and says, "You are going to have a son, and your son should be raised under a Nazirite vow," which means he can't cut his hair, he can't drink any alcohol, and he has to eat clean foods, like no unclean foods, according to the Israelite laws. So Manoah, who's Samson's dad, and his wife raised Samson in a Nazirite way. And so Samson has never had alcohol or unclean foods, and he's never cut his hair. The first thing we see about Samson is he's going on a little trip, and he sees a pretty lady and says, "I want her for my wife." And so he goes home to his parents and says, "Get me that lady. I want to marry her." And they say, "No, Samson, she is a Philistine, and we're not supposed to marry people who believe in different gods than we do." And Samson says, "I don't care. I want her for my wife." And so he goes back to visit her, to talk to her, to make sure that he really likes her. And on the way there, he is attacked by a young lion. And he is empowered by the Lord to rip the lion apart, and then he leaves the dead body there. He goes to visit the lady. He likes her. He comes back and says, "Yeah, I definitely want to marry her." So as he goes back to get married, he sees that this is the place where the lion was. And so he goes and he looks, and there are bees and honey in the dead body of the lion. And so he scoops some out, the honey, not the bees. And he scoops some out, and he's eating it and walking along, and he sees his parents, and he says, "Here, you want some?" And they have some. The thing is, lions are unclean animals. Bees are unclean animals. Honey is okay, but not from a dead body. He is ceremonially unclean right now. He should go wash, and then he would be unclean until nightfall, but he doesn't do that. He just keeps going. So he gets to his, right now, fiance's house, and there are 30 Philistines there, and he decides that he's going to give them a riddle about the lion and the honey, and they can't figure it out. And at that time, a wedding feast lasts for a really long time, and so the bride and groom are married, but then they still have like a week-long party. So he has given them the riddle the first day. They have not been able to figure it out, and then they come to Samson's wife and say, "Please make him tell you the riddle, and then you tell us the answer, and then we're not going to have to to pay what we should pay. So Samson had wagered that they would not be able to figure it out, and if they couldn't figure it out, they owed him 30 outfits. But if they did figure it out, he would owe them 30 outfits, 30 pieces of clothes. Well, Samson's wife gets him to tell the answer, and then the men get the riddle right, and Samson gets really, really mad, and he goes and kills 30 Philistines and takes their clothes and gives them to these men that were at the wedding. This is not a very good end to the wedding, you think? The groom runs out and kills 30 people and brings back their clothes. So and then he leaves and he doesn't come back for a while. Well, later he comes back to visit his wife and he finds out that she has been given in marriage to somebody else. He gets really, really mad. He gets foxes and ties their tails together with torches and then lets them loose, and they are let loose in a field of grain, and it hurts their grain and their olive trees. Interesting thing about it is that the Philistines worship a god named Dagon, and he is the god of grain. And so it's just interesting that Samson burns up their grain with torches and foxes. After that, he meets a lady named Delilah, and I think a lot of us know this story. She's another Philistine, and the Philistines come to her and say, "Get Samson to tell you what the source of his strength is." And we know the source of his strength is what? The Lord. But she begs and begs and begs, and he's like, "Fine," and then tells her something that's not the truth. And she goes and tells the Philistines, and they do that, and it doesn't work. He's still strong. And that happens several times. And you would think that Samson would know not to tell her the truth because she's going to tell the people and that he's going to lose his strength. And I wonder why. Why would he tell? Why would he tell the truth? Maybe he feels like he's strong by himself and he doesn't need the Lord and he doesn't need his Nazirite vow. I don't know. But he eventually tells Delilah to cut his hair and that he would lose his strength. Well, she waits for him to fall asleep. She cuts off his hair and then calls for the men, and they come in, and he has lost his strength. And they take him and they capture him and they gouge out his eyes. And then they put him in prison. After that, there are about 3,000 Philistines, and they all come together and they're worshiping their god Dagon, and they're very worshipful because he has delivered them from their enemy, who is Samson. And that's what they're so excited about. And they are just praising him because of that. And so they bring Samson in, and he can't see because they've taken his eyes. And he asks to be put in between the pillars that hold up this big temple to this foreign god named Dagon. And he prays to the Lord that the Lord would give him strength, that he would be able to avenge himself for his 2 eyes. And then he pushes the pillars, the temple falls down, and 3,000 Philistines were killed. And so was Samson. What's the point of this story? It seems like Samson doesn't do too much right. Samson is not a role model here. So what's the point? He is driven by lust, by anger, by vengeance. That's not what we're supposed to do. The point is, he doesn't do everything right, and he's still used by God. Much the same way that the Philistines were used by God to point his people back to him, Samson is used by God to deliver his people, not because the people cried out, because in the story they didn't, and not because Samson is so great, but because the Lord loves his people and he is merciful and forgiving. Also, the physical strength that Samson had was a gift from the Lord. But I'm not sure that Samson used it always to glorify the Lord. Was everything that happened, was everything that Samson did according to the will of the Lord? Is everything that Samson did what the Lord wanted him to do? It doesn't seem like it, but the Lord uses those things to fulfill His will, to fulfill His purpose for His people. The Lord gave Samson great strength, and Samson maybe used it unwisely. The Lord gives us great abilities and talents, all of us. Some of you maybe don't feel like you have a lot of talent, but the Lord has made you exactly as you were supposed to be. So, do we use our talents and our strength to glorify the Lord? Do we do His will with what He's given us? I hope that we do. I hope that you use all of your talents and all your gifts to glorify the Lord. I want you guys to be looking for how the Lord has blessed you. Maybe it's with the things you have or the talent you have. Maybe it's with your family. How has the Lord blessed you? And then I want you to pray and ask Him how you should use those gifts to glorify Him. We have a lot of time right now because school is out early and we can't go to too many places. How is the Lord wanting to use you? And don't believe the lie that you have to be perfect to be used by the Lord. Because from this story we know that God can use imperfect people. So pray to the Lord, ask for His guidance, and use your gifts and your talents to honor Him.